everybody, welcome back to my kitchen. Today I want to demonstrate for you a special recipe from my family. It's blueberry buckle. This comes from my dad's mother, my grandma Eva Emily Richards. She was born in 1918 and grew up through the Depression. She was never one of those cheerful grandmoms that always wanted to bake with you, but she always had plenty of baked goods around. It was sort of her fun thing to do on her own, and I can always remember delicious baked goods at her house. Now we've just begun June and we're getting into berry season, and so I sort of think of this as the sort of dessert that she would have in her home when we would come over for a supper or a picnic, cookout, whatever she was having. It's pretty simple and basic, and you can customize it a little bit if you want to, but I'm gonna make it just how Grandma would make it, okay? I'm gonna start off with 4 tablespoons or a 1/4 cup of unsalted butter. Sometimes Grandma used margarine or shortening in hers, and I think that's kind of a throwback to the day, maybe sort of World War II, when things were a little more scarce and she was having to ration, or she might not have had the butter that she needed. I just think butter is best, so since we have butter today, I'm gonna go ahead and use that. 3/4 of a cup of regular granulated sugar. And you're gonna go ahead and cream this up together. I'm gonna use my hand mixer, but if you have a regular stand mixer, you can go ahead and do that. At this point, I want to add 1 whole egg. Now, I've let this sit out to come to room temperature, and I think that's important with this particular cake, and the reason why is if your ingredients are too cold, they tend to kind of lock up a little bit, particularly if you happen to use frozen berries in the recipe. It can really get tight on you. So I'm going to add to my butter and sugar my 1 egg, 1 whole egg. Just continue to cream it up. Alrighty, you can see there's a change in it. It's gotten more light and fluffy, kind of more like frosting, and the color has gotten paler. To this, I want to begin to add my dry ingredients. And at this point, I want to sift them. A lot of people will say, well, why do you sift ingredients? There's 2 reasons why you sift ingredients. First, it helps you to evenly incorporate the ingredients, and also it helps to limit the amount of time that you then have to stir ingredients in, because if they're already sort of mixed together a bit, you'll have less mixing time when it comes to incorporating it together with your batter, and that means a more tender baked good. So I have 2 cups of all-purpose flour, some in there. To that, I want to add 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Sure to get that all out. That's important. That's what's going to make your cake rise. And 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'm just going to tap it in there. You can also use those type of sifters that have the trigger on it where you pull it, but I happen to like this particular type of sieve. It's great not only for sifting ingredients, but it's also good like if later on I want to dust something with powdered sugar, or if even I have some small things I want to drain, like say dried bean or canned beans. It works really well. All right. I'm gonna have to go nice and slow because I don't want to wear this. And while I'm doing it, I'm gonna add 1/2 cup of room temperature whole milk. I'm gonna pause for just a second. I don't want to overmix it, but I do want to get that butter that's sort of collected itself around the sides of the bowl. Now keep in mind, this is not your traditional cake batter. People say, well, blueberry buckle. Blueberry buckle is a cake, but it's more biscuity and more dense, and I hate to use the word dry because it isn't a dry cake. We think of things If you think of a baked good, you'd say the word dry, you think of it as being negative. It's not in this case. It's a much denser, almost biscuity texture to this cake. Think of it almost as like a pan of muffins. All right, and I'm going to just bring it just to, because I don't want to overmix it. I'm going to press out. Scraping everything off my beaters. I'm not going to waste a bit. Alrighty, you can see I still have a little bit of flour around the outsides. That's okay. Don't overmix it. You want to have it as tender as possible. And remember, I'm going to give it some more stirring with, manually with my hand. All right. So you look at that and you say, well, gosh, that's awful thick for a cake batter. You're right, it is. This is different. It's not necessarily a cake. It's what we call buckle. So it's more like a biscuity, a muffiny type of texture. All righty. I have 1 pint of fresh blueberries. You can also use frozen. Keep in mind that if you use the frozen ones, you don't want to let the berries sit too long in the batter itself, because they'll begin to sweat and weep, and before you know it, you'll have like a gray colored cake. So you just want to kind of fold it together, so over and under. Right. Take your time with it and know that you have to be a little bit more gentle with it, because it does have whole fruit in it and it does have blue juice. Alrighty. And I'm not going to overmix it. You can see I've got a little bit at the bottom that's not completely incorporated. Okay, so I'm done. I'm going to now put it in my pan. So I've prepared a 9 by 13 inch rectangular cake pan. I just hit it with pan spray, and I put a piece of parchment paper in it. Now the parchment paper is not absolutely necessary, but I want to be able to pull my whole cake out to be able to cut nice slices for presentation. You can simply just omit the paper and just spray the pan, and you can cut squares and take it out just like you would any like brownie. Right. And I promise you, it's going to resist this process of spreading just a little bit. And the reason why is because of how thick it is. You can see the thickness in this. Again, it's not a cake batter. So if you make this at home and you have it thick like this, don't panic. You haven't done anything wrong. It's exactly how it would traditionally be. And I grabbed my offset spatula, or you can just use the rubber scraper if you like. But I'm going to kind of just press it out. And remember, if you've used frozen berries, which you can very well do, it's going to be even a little tougher to spread it. I'm going to try to get it in all the way into the corners. This really takes me back. This recipe really thinks of my grandma in her kitchen down the Jersey Shore, and we come over on Saturday or Sunday to have supper with her, and she's prepared a buckle. Oh, it was so good. And this is going to be delicious. A real heirloom recipe. I mean, Grandma was born in 1918, and I think she's been making this most of her life, and she got the recipe from her own mother, Ida Stone Bolt. And I know that Ida was born in the later part of the 19th century, so this one really takes us back. Our family didn't create the recipe, but we're certainly passing it down from generation to generation. All right, I've spread it all out, but here's the best part. We're gonna make a delicious crumb topping. So I'm gonna set this aside, and I'm gonna make the topping. Okay, I'm gonna make the delicious crumb topping for the blueberry buckle now. For the topping, you're gonna need a half a cup of brown sugar. I'm using the light brown sugar, but you could also use the dark brown sugar. Dark brown sugar and light brown sugar, the simple difference is that the light brown sugar is more refined and has less molasses than its brother, the dark molasses. Also going to need 4 tablespoons or 1/4 cup of unsalted butter. Bring this together. And this one, because the butter's soft, we can really just do this very quickly with a spoon, or even I'm going to get in it with my hands in just a minute. I have a 1/2 teaspoon of good Saigon cinnamon. Love that. That's going to give it such a delicious, sort of almost coffee cake flavor to the dessert. And then finally, I also have a 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour. Now, this recipe is never called for nuts, but if you really like to have nuts with this type of cake, you could certainly add a few tablespoons of it. I would say more finely diced or chopped walnuts or pecans would do really well. And remember, I've used blueberries today, but it's berry season, so maybe you have some wild raspberries growing around, or you've been out berry picking, or you've gotten even cherries this time of year. You can really switch it up and use what you like in it. All right, I've hit the point where I'm getting impatient with my rubber scraper, so I'm gonna get in there with my hands. And you'll know when you've brought it together enough because you start to get like little balls of streusel. And also you'll see less of the dry flour. This would be a great time to add the nuts if you wanted to add it. Alrighty, that looks good. You can see I've got crumbles. Oops, spilling some crumbles. Alrighty, I'm gonna take my cake and just go all the way across and try to get every corner if I can so that there's enough crumb topping on each piece. And don't neglect to use all of it. You know what I always say, don't be stingy. All right, give it a little shake. All right, I'm gonna put this in the oven at 350 degrees. It's gonna take anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour to bake. I'm probably gonna have a peek at it at 45 minutes and see where we're at. Remember that a toothpick inserted to the center should come out completely dry. You'll see little bits of cake on it, maybe moist bits, but there shouldn't have a batter look to it. My blueberry buckle baked for just under 45 minutes, took about 42 minutes to bake. It will vary from time to time depending on the temperature in your house, and remember the temperature of your ingredients. If I were to use frozen fruit in there, it might take a few minutes longer, or if I use larger pieces of fruit, it may take a little bit longer. It is variable, but about 45 minutes should do it. All right, I took it out, I let it cool to room temperature, and you can see it was on the parchment paper, so it made a nice handy sling to pull it out of the pan and place it down onto the cooling rack. What I'm gonna do is just slip it over onto a cutting board, and I'm gonna cut it into my pieces, and I cut it just like I would brownies. I'm gonna cut it in half. You can see I have a long serrated knife, because I don't want to just push down, I want to slice back and forth. So in half, and then I'm going to do it into thirds. And you can certainly make bigger pieces if you like. I like this size because typically we would have had this if we were having like a picnic or a cookout, and this way we typically have quite a few people and everybody could get a good size slice. And then I'm going to rotate it and cut it into thirds yet again. Okay. So I got 24 nice pieces. And the debate with brownies is the same debate with blueberry buckle. Is it a center, or is it a corner, or is it a side? I'm simply going to go with the side. You can see that lovely cake. You get blueberries throughout, and you get the nice streusel topping. I'm just gonna place it down and dust it with a little bit of powdered sugar. And this is exactly how I would serve it. You could also serve it with a little bit of whipped cream if you like, but basically it just stands on its own. And I really do enjoy it for this time of year. One, because we get to use the fresh fruit that's in season, and also because it doesn't require refrigeration once you've baked it. It should be fine for 2 to 3 days out on your kitchen counter, or as long as it lasts, which I don't think will be very long. So Grandmom Garner's Blueberry Buckle.